Good afternoon. Better. Now she'll be happy. My name is Marilyn Katz with the Chicago Women Take Action Alliance, and on behalf of all 44 sponsoring organizations, let me welcome you, and I'll be co-convening with my co-convener, Betty Magnus. We're really glad you could be with us today, and before we start the formal program, we'd like to get done with some housekeeping and some introductions. So I'm going to let Betty do the introduction of all the 44 groups who came together around that women's agenda, which I know you all fight for and is in your hearts, and who've done a magnificent job of working together to bring about this day. So after all the introductions, I'd like you to give them a very big hand.
Thanks, Marilyn. So as she said, I'm Betty Magnus, and first I'd like to introduce the elected officials who are here. President Tony Preckwinkle. Okay, and Sal Flores, who is a candidate. Where are you? Stand up. Thank you. Are there any other candidates or elected officials here who did not sign in? Raise your hand, stand up, be recognized. All right. It is the year of the woman. So, as I call your names, they're going to raise their hands so you'll know what organization they're representing. AAUW Illinois, Action Illinois, Adlai Stevenson Center on Democracy, Affinity, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Inc., Theta Omega Chapter, Chicago, Illinois, Amalgamated Transit Workers, Arab American Family Services, Cause the Effect, Chicago Foundation for Women, Chicago National Organization for Women, Chicago Teens Take Action, Chicago Women Take Action, Chicago Women's History Center, Community Renewal Society, Democratic Party of Oak Park, Enlace Chicago, Fierce Over 40, Fight for 15 Chicago, Girls Talk, Girlfriends Group, Gorgeous Within, Hustle Mommies, Illinois Council Against Handgun Violence, Illinois Democratic Women, Illinois Psychological Association Women's Section, Illinois Women's Institute for Leadership, Indivisible Illinois, Mujeres Latinas en Acción, I hope I did that right, National Council of Jewish Women, Chicago North Shore, Planned Parenthood of Illinois, Power Pumps, Pride Action Tank, Rainbow Push, that's my organization, Safe Coalition for Human Rights, SEIU Healthcare, Voices and Faces Project, Windy City Times, Women and Children's First Bookstore, Women Employed, Women's Business Development Center, Women's March Chicago, Women's National Democratic Club, YWCA of Metropolitan Chicago. If your organization was not called, you need to join us next time.
Wow, very impressive grouping of women. Chicago is a women's town. So two more bits of housekeeping. For those of you and your friends who couldn't make it, they can watch on cable channel 27 or go to 3 different live streams, cantv.org, Indivisible, and the Chicago Women Take Action Facebook pages. Indivisibles and Chicago Women Take Action. Now, for you here, you can tweet to your heart's delight. Hashtags ILGov8, CWTA Alliance, women's agenda, hashtag in front of both those. Everybody got those, or do I need to repeat? Hashtag ILGOV8. It says 8. A hashtag CWTA Alliance. Hashtag Women's Agenda. All good? Good. Now it's really my pleasure to introduce the 4 candidates and 2 moderators. I'm going to start with our moderators. Everyone knows Mary Ann Ahern. We're big fans of hers.
Thank you. Thank you.
And a lot of us have become big fans of Jackie Algie.
All right.
Over the last years. SEIU Healthcare, and a great fighter and intellect for us all. And the 4 candidates who I think you know, but in case you don't, we're going to go alphabetically. Our first is Daniel Biss. Our second is T.L. Hardiman. Chris Kennedy. And J.B. Pritzker. And it's our hope that after this 2-hour session, the first of which will be about a forum, a little over an hour, then various questions, first that you've turned in and then from the audience. It is our hope that you hear those watching on TV and live stream, and by telling your friends and tweets, that will know them a lot better and how they're addressing the issues that women have said are important to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, good afternoon. Can you hear me? Yes. If you can hear me in the balcony, wave your hand. All right. Very good. Very good. I am going to start our questioning of the candidates, and I'll start with J.B. Pritzker. What have you done and what will you do if elected governor to empower women and end sexual harassment, abuse, and assault? There's a part B to that, but we'll do that portion of the question first.
Just to be clear, are we going to do our opening statements? I know there was some talk about having an opening statement first,
please.
And then you want to go to the question?
I think you should do your opening statement first.
Terrific. Just to introduce myself. So, well, thank you very much. Thank you to Jackie, to Mary Ann, to all the sponsoring organizations. I think I'll begin by saying my name is J.B. Pritzker, and I'm running for governor because everything that we care about is under siege by that misogynist, racist, xenophobic, homophobic president in Washington, D.C., Donald Trump, and his local partner, Governor Bruce Rauner. For decades, I have stood with you and with many in this room to expand women's rights and women's health, to protect a woman's right to choose and to elect women to public office here in Illinois and across the nation. These issues, these important issues, have been integral to me, important to me for much longer than just the time that I've been running for governor. In fact, as an activist working alongside many of you, we have worked to fight for these issues. I didn't just start fighting for women's rights as a candidate for governor. I didn't just start marching with you in April in Springfield or in Chicago in January, but 25 years ago with some people in this room on behalf of women's rights in Washington to fight for a woman's right to choose. And there are thousands of children across the state and thousands of mothers and fathers who have received early childhood education for their children because of the work that I've done for many, many years nationally and here in Illinois. And there are 230,000 kids that live in low-income school districts across the state of Illinois who get school breakfast because I helped to expand President Obama's No Kid Hungry program so that those kids could start the day off right. Women, thank you. Women have been integral to this campaign, have been integral to the movement that I have been a part of, and when I'm governor, I look forward to working with many of you to put Springfield back on the side of working mothers, working fathers, working families across our state. Thank you.
T.O., would you like to give an opening statement?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, hello everybody. I'm T.O. Hardiman. I'm running for governor as well. This is my second run for governor. I ran for governor in 2014 and secured close to 30% of the state vote, winning 30 counties downstate. My running mate, her name is Patricia Avery. She's the former president of the NAACP in Champaign-Urbana and a former county commissioner in Champaign. We're running for governor because our campaign is powered by the people, and your voice is our mission. We're doing the best we can. We have a 2020 plan, which represents a perfect vision for the good people here in Illinois. I have a master's degree in inner city studies, and I'm currently serving as a professor at North Park University, and I still have my organization, Violence Interrupters Incorporated. When it comes down to supporting women, I've been supporting women throughout my entire career. Some years ago, when I used to oversee ceasefire, we helped rescue 12 young women from a prostitution ring in the town of Cicero. I helped save the lives of 2 transgender women 2 years ago. And I used to have a recovery home many years ago where I helped turn around the lives of 75 women from drug addiction. And the list goes on and on. So I'm not a newcomer to standing up for women's rights and supporting women universally. I'm a married man. I've been married for 18 years. I'm glad to be here. I want everybody to take a look at me as a different type of candidate. I'm running to become the first African-American governor of the state of Illinois, and I'm looking to turn my campaign into a big movement statewide, a movement that supports everybody in the state of Illinois. Instead of running from the top down, I'm running from the bottom up, and I plan to support everybody. I've traveled the entire state, downstate, central Illinois, all through Lake County, everywhere, and a lot of people are taking to my campaign right now, and we need about 300,000 votes to win the Democratic primary, and that's the goal that we're aiming for. I want to thank you all for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Tito. Thank you. Chris, would you like to give your opening statement, please?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you all. I'm Chris Kennedy. I'm one of Bobby and Ethel Kennedy's 11 children, and I'm the father of Kate and Sarah Kennedy, who are here today, and a couple of other kids as well. I came to Illinois 31 years ago to learn how food is made and distributed in the United States because I wanted to get into the anti-hunger movement as a result of what President Reagan was doing in the 1980s. So I moved from Boston to Decatur in 1986. Came to Chicago in 1987. I started volunteering at the Greater Chicago Food Depository, became chairman of the board. We doubled the size of the operation and started the first fresh fruit and vegetable program. I moved to the Merchandise Mart, I ran it, and during the time I was there, more companies moved to Illinois to open an office for the first time at the Merchandise Mart Center than any other location in the state. I volunteered at the Chicago Convention Tourism Bureau, where I became chairman and got the Democrats at the City Hall and Republicans in the State House to work together to fully fund our tourism efforts and expand McCormick Place. I was chairman of the board of the University of Illinois. I've seen the state from so many different vantage points, and I love it, but it's headed in the wrong direction. Under Governor Rauner and the Democratic Party itself, we need change, radical change. We need to commit ourselves to great education. If we say to ourselves, we can be the best educated state in America, not just universities, but K through 12 and early access, we can solve every problem this state has. I want Illinois to be the best educated state in America, and that is why I'm running for governor.
My name is Daniel Biss, State Senator in the 9th District, candidate for Governor of Illinois. I'm so happy to be here. I don't even know what to say. This is the future of the Democratic Party. This is the future of activism, and this is the future of our country. Embedded in the extraordinary work done by the many, many sponsoring organizations, the many friends in this room, and the many people who have been either working and fighting in the streets for decades, or maybe working and fighting in the streets since early in the morning of November 9th of 2016. This This moment is a time to fight for the soul of the Democratic Party. And we can look at this stage and see why. This is a moment of a rising women's movement, a moment when over 80% of the calls made to Congress to save health care are made by women, a moment when all of our campaigns are being powered by extraordinary women activists across this state, and a moment when you got 4 guys wearing suits and ties on this stage. I'm not proud of that, but it's a sign of the system of oppression embedded in our government, our society. It's a sign of a patriarchy that is powerful and strong, and it is time for a new politics to upend that power balance. It is time for a movement-based people's politics to transform the balance of power, wrest it from those who have had it for so far too long and used it so irresponsibly, and to build a state government that works for the rest of us. I'm Daniel Biss. I can't wait for this conversation. Thank you.
Just to go over the rules one more time, we have questions, both of us. You have 90 seconds to answer the question that we asked, not the question you'd like to answer. But we will ask a question to one of you. If the rest of you would like to have a chance to weigh in on that question, you have the opportunity afterwards. Otherwise, we will keep moving because we just have a lot of questions today, all right? So, Jackie, let's get started.
Yeah, let's get started. So, to repeat the question I asked you first, JB, what have you done and what will you do if elected governor to empower women and end sexual harassment, abuse, and assault?
Good. Thank you very much for the question, and let me begin by saying that this is really a question about power, power for women. That it's important that in addressing whether it's sexual harassment or domestic violence or sexual assault, that we don't have enough leadership from women who are, in fact, importantly going to change the face of this nation. It has started, but it is long from over, that women should take power. Now, I have spent a lifetime, in fact, helping women get elected to public office, fighting to make sure that at the very highest offices in our land that women are our representatives. I worked hard to try to get one woman in particular elected to the United States presidency. But I also have promoted women in public office, like my phenomenal Lieutenant Governor candidate, State Representative Juliana Stratton, a graduate, by the way, of IWIL, the Illinois Women's Institute for Leadership. And I am so proud of the campaign that we've put together, again, led by women. And in my administration, we will make sure that we have women at the very highest levels of our administration, running departments and right around the governor, making sure that policy is made, in fact, by women. I've spoken out about sexual harassment significantly. What I've said is, I think it's incumbent upon men to stand up and say, we believe you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, you'd like to answer?
Yeah. Well, the Hardeman and Avery administration, we plan to address this issue of sexual harassment head on and do the best we can to make sure that it's not being tolerated in our administration. Recently, U.S. Senator Roy Moore said that America was great during slavery, and I don't know what planet he comes from, because America was not great during slavery. And the reason I bring that up is because my ancestors really struggled here in America through the transatlantic slave trade, and women should not be struggling and be afraid to speak up when a situation occurs of sexual harassment. So we take that very seriously, and I have a proven track record in supporting women on a universal level. So we're going to deal with that issue and make sure it doesn't happen, and we're going to make sure that we have a very comfortable environment in the Hardeman and Avery administration where women can come forward and not worry about losing their position when they speak up about sexual harassment or any type of abuse. That's what we plan to do. Thank you.
Same question?
Yes.
Sure,
Okay.
yes.
Good. I mean, I'm very proud of my track record, and I think that track record is a pretty good indication of what I would do if you were kind enough to elect me governor of the state. At the Merchandise Mart, which I ran, where we ran 90 big trade shows all over North America, I'd say half to most, depended every year, of the vice presidents who ran that business were all women. When you have a leadership team that looks like that, you remove sexual harassment because it's a clear indication, a tone at the top. I'm glad that I never had to sign an NDA against a sexual harassment lawsuit in our operation. You look at the Greater Chicago Food Depository, Kate Mayer is there, came in while I was involved, is now considered the most powerful woman in the anti-hunger movement. At the University of Illinois, the chancellors of all 3 campuses, the most powerful officer there in Champaign-Urbana, in Springfield, here in Chicago, were all women. At the Chicago Convention and Tourism Bureau, the head of sales, arguably the most powerful woman in the convention industry in America, was a woman who worked with us. At the state, I'm sorry, there we go.
Thank you. Because he has the timer. I'm not sure all of you can see it, but we have a timer here.
We have a timer.
Yes, thank you.
That's okay.
Well done.
Can we start by thanking the brave activists who have spoken out and transformed this conversation? The most important thing that a man in power can do is listen to and trust women when they speak out, support them, be clear and swift in condemning people who are perpetrators, and also be clear and swift in condemning people who are involved in victim blaming, to create a space where it's safe for people to speak out. We need a lot more women in positions of power. I'm incredibly proud of my lieutenant governor, an extraordinarily strong woman, a single mom who put herself through a PhD program at Northern Illinois University, Letisa Wallace. She is a partner in this ticket, and she will be a partner in governing the state of Illinois. I believe I'm still the only candidate who's promised that my cabinet will be majority women, and it will be majority women up and down the cabinet. We need to use the power of state government to make sure that women are represented in the top echelons of all parts of society. The state pension funds are invested in tremendous numbers of corporations. We should use our role as voting shareholders to make sure that corporations are led by women. The state has tremendous power. That's what I'm going to do as governor.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the part B to that question is, since Chris Kennedy brought it up, have any of you entered into a legal agreement as it relates to sexual harassment with a woman?
No.
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 Oh, that's a deep no. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was like any kind of NDA related to sexual harassment or witnessing any kind of activity.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Right. You're all good on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we needed to know, because it is such a big issue right now.
It is a very big
All right, with the federal funding for the full reproductive health services provided through Obamacare at risk, what will you do to assure that women's right to abortion and contraception? What will you do about that? Let's start with Mr. Hardiman.
Yeah, I went on the record. I support House Bill 40, women's right to choose. No one should be able to dictate to women on what decisions they make with their personal life. And I would do everything possible to work with the federal government to make sure that we move straight forward to support women's rights on a universal level. I'm one of the keynote speakers every year in Boston for the Women's National Conference on Equality and Justice. And we support a woman's right to choose on the highest level ever. And I don't know why, even in the year 2017, we're still struggling with this issue. This is something that should have been done a long time ago. And no man should be standing up telling women anything, really, you know. And then even in the state of Illinois, we have women that work the same jobs that men work, and they do not receive the same pay. In the first 90 days of our administration, we're going to turn that around in the first 90 days of our administration. So to be more specific and answer your question, I definitely support that measure and make sure that women get what they need on all levels possible, okay?
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy.
I mean, I think it's incredibly frightening in the United States that we have to fight this battle at the state level because the federal government may not be there for us. But the federal government may not be there for us. It may not protect a woman's right to choose. I mean, the president's made it clear that he's not going to stand by our side. He's standing by the side of a predator. Goes after 14-year-old girls. That's his idea of controlling your own body, making it available for a pervert. That's not what we need in the United States, but we need to understand that that fight at the federal government may move to the states, and we need a strong, clear commitment from all of us and every member of the Democratic Party that it will stand by a woman's right to choose no matter what.
Senator Biss.
Here's the value system we need to promote. Everyone needs equal access to full reproductive health care. Full reproductive health care. That's not just about making sure that abortion is legal, it's about access. That's why I fought so hard for House Bill 40 to ensure that women who are covered by Medicaid and women who are covered by state employee health insurance have that access. That's not good enough. We need universal access, and that means universal health care. That's why I'm fighting for single-payer health care. A single-payer health care system means it doesn't matter who you are, where you are in the state of Illinois, your package of benefits is the same, and that package of benefits must include full access to reproductive health care. Until we achieve that, we are going to be rehashing this fight in different iterations on different days and different ways, depending on who wins which election, who loses which election. Universal access should be universal access. That should be all physical and all mental health care, and it certainly needs to be reproductive health care. That's what I'm going to do.
Can we hold the applause? Let's keep the applause down so we get a better conversation going. We appreciate it. Thank you. Mr. Pritzker.
Well, it's clear we're all in agreement that we need to protect a woman's right to choose. And of course, I'm in agreement that we need universal health care. But in order to truly protect women's health, it's important to make sure that we protect it in the law, and maybe most importantly, in the Constitution. And that's why I think we need to pass the Equal Rights Amendment here in Illinois and make Illinois the 37th state so that we can have a Constitution that reflects the kind of equality that I think all of us in this room believe that women ought to have. Now, the first time that I marched on behalf of a woman's right to choose was not, I mentioned the many times that I've marched, but actually it wasn't 25 years ago in Washington. It was with my mother in the 1970s when this wasn't such a settled issue. And I have to say that history led me to have the kind of activism that I've had over the many years here, and it's why I was so outspoken about HB 40, so much so I was on TV, I was outspoken by traveling the state, talking about HB 40 and making sure that legislators knew they have to vote for HB 40. It's one reason why it got passed, but here's the thing. The leaders, the chief sponsors of HB 40, Sarah Feigenholtz and Heather Staines, who are true heroes on this issue, both are significant supporters of my campaign and have been since the very beginning. Why is that? Because longer than just the time that I've been running, much longer, decades now, I have stood up for a woman's right to choose. I think that your history of standing up on an issue is evidence. Your past about fighting for women's rights is evidence of what you will do as governor, and I will be a governor who protects a woman's reproductive rights, makes sure that insurance companies cover contraception and abortion rights, and making sure that our kids, that girls in their teens have access to contraception and abortion rights. It's important that we protect those rights all across our state.
Thank you. Jackie.
So our next question has to do with the $15 minimum wage for the state. As you know, SEIU, along with many others, fought to make sure that we could pass a bill that would increase our minimum wage to $15 an hour. And yet, Governor Rauner vetoed the bill. It passed in both chambers, and he vetoed. How would you respond, or what would you do in response to $15 minimum wage? Because what we do know is that people are not making enough money. It's hurting our economy, it's hurting our communities, it's hurting our state. What would you do as governor?
Mr. Kennedy.
I don't think you should, I don't think I want to be part of a society. I don't want to be a part of an economy I don't want to be a part of a culture where we ask others among us to work full-time and still live in poverty. That should be the standard. From there, everything else should flow. So what wage rate do we need to guarantee people who have full-time jobs so that they don't live in poverty? Truth is, it's probably about $15 an hour now in rural Illinois. It's probably $17 now in the city of Chicago and the metropolitan area. In every business I've been involved in the merchandise mart, we paid $15 and more, a lot more. We could pay it. Why should our competitors not have to as well? Why should we pay a living wage and others get away with not doing that, forcing the rest of us to bear those costs, keeping people from having not just a living wage, but the ability to live where they want to, send their kids to the schools they want to, pay for the health care that they need, invest for retirement? That's the America. That's the dream. That's the promise of our country. And we should guarantee that that's available here in Illinois.
Thank you. Senator Biss, what would you do as governor to support raising a minimum wage?
Well, let's start here. No one should work full-time and live in poverty, and economic inequality has metastasized in this country. It's an emergency. It's an emergency, so we need to take bold action. What would I do, Jackie? I would proudly stand with SEIU and work hard to put another $15 minimum wage bill on my desk, the way I worked with SEIU to put the first one on Bruce Rauner's desk. Unfortunately, he, unsurprisingly, but reprehensibly vetoed that bill. I was a proud co-sponsor of that bill, and I was excited to work hard to put that bill on his desk. But let's back up a second and ask about what we want to make sure the minimum wage does. Yes, it's got to be high enough. Shouldn't stop there. It should increase with time. There should be a cost of living increase built into that minimum wage so that we know that it will continue to be a living wage in 5 and 10 years and longer, and not force us to go back to the table to beg to get back to just where we were before. But let me say something else that is extremely important, and this is relevant to gender economic empowerment. It's even relevant to sexual harassment. Do you know there's a loophole in the minimum wage law? Do you know that an extraordinary number of workers are allowed to be paid far below the minimum wage? They call it the tip credit for servers who are tipped, but it's really just a loophole. That's wrong. That's got to be out of the law, because you know what it does? Not only is it unfair, not only is it immoral, it forces servers, mostly women, to have to fight for tips. It encourages sexual harassment and mistreatment of women servers, and it makes it harder for them to step up because a greater part of their livelihood is on the line. It's immoral, it's wrong, it's unfair, and we wouldn't stand for it if the population of workers who were affected by it weren't overwhelmingly women. When I'm governor, I'm going to fight for $15 minimum wage with a COLA and no so-called tip credit or tip loophole to make sure that everybody who's working full-time has that shot at a living wage.
JB?
As you can see, we all favor a $15 minimum wage. I think there's much more, though, that we've got to do than just get a minimum wage law passed. And by the way, we used to call that $15 minimum wage a living wage. It's really not anymore. It took so long for us to get to a point where we're even talking about or getting it passed in the legislature that it's passed us by. It ought to be, we ought to have higher wages in our state. But even if we get it passed, it's not enough. We've got to make sure that while we're doing that we're also enforcing our equal pay for equal work laws in the state, that we're making sure that we're providing child care assistance. You know, Bruce Rauner cut child care assistance in the state by 90%. 90%. And if you're making $20,000 or $30,000 a year and you can't get access to child care assistance, you've got to quit your job. It's not right. We've got to not just put it back where it was, but increase it on a sliding scale from up to $60,000 a year in earnings so that people can get a real break on their child care expenses. We need to get child care expenses down to 10% of someone's income. Today, it's at 30, 40, 50%. Child care assistance is critically important in addition to a $15 minimum wage. But On top of all of that, we haven't created any jobs in this state. We have to create jobs. For there to be a $15 minimum wage job, you've got to have some new jobs that get created. So I've put forward a plan for the entire state for job creation. And one notable point in that is helping people start small businesses in the forgotten communities and neighborhoods all across the city of Chicago, the county of Cook, and all across the 102 counties of the state of Illinois. Job creation will help us increase wages beyond just the minimum wage.
Thank you.
Yes, on behalf of the Hardeman Navy campaign, we also have a 2020 plan. We support the minimum wage. If you look back on my community activism, you'll see that I've marched every step of the way for the increase of the minimum wage of $15 an hour, starting at McDonald's out in Oak Brook, all downtown Chicago with tens of thousands of people to support the minimum wage. Another bill that Hardeman supports is House Bill 453, which is the financial transaction tax, which can bring in $3 billion of new revenue here in the state of Illinois. We can use some of those funds right there to create jobs, like $50 million for capital construction projects in central and southern Illinois, and at the same time we can use some of those funds to provide small businesses with incentives instead of providing so many incentives for these big businesses out here. We need to uplift the smaller business people throughout the state of Illinois, and that's what we will do with House Bill 453, and I'll sign that into law immediately. And at the same time, we definitely support the $15 minimum wage. I'm the only candidate sitting up here that worked for minimum wage many, many years ago when I was a teenager. So I understand how it feels to work for minimum wage, and that's why we need a governor that can work from the bottom to the top. Somebody that's worked on all levels in society that can relate and understand young people out here and people that cannot make ends meet because they don't make enough money because they're not paid a living wage to support their families. I'm that man that has been through those type of experiences in my life. Okay, and I'll leave it at that. I don't want to overtalk it. Thank you all for listening.
Next question. Paid medical leave. Paid medical leave for individual illness or the illness of a family member often makes the difference between sustainability and poverty for many families. So, if you are governor, what steps will you take to ensure that this legislation is part of Illinois' Constitution, or, I mean, just that folks know that they're protected. And I'm not just talking about those that have nice jobs at companies like I do, but the rest of us out there as well. My young kids who are just starting out working. How do we make sure that everyone gets that same opportunity? Where did we leave off? Who's next? Senator Biss. Thank you.
You know, it's just nothing short of barbaric what we do to families. It's nothing short of barbaric that we ask families to figure out a way to survive while living paycheck to paycheck without paid leave and an infant in the house. It's preposterous. There's no other country with the kind of wealth that America has that would even contemplate doing this. And there are states that have begun to fix it. And that's why I introduced legislation in Springfield to fix it. Worked with advocates in this room to craft the right legislation and put it in Springfield, and have been fighting to see what we can do to pass it. Now, let's be honest, we've got a long road ahead of us, and with Bruce Rauner as the governor, that bill probably wouldn't be signed anyway. But we're starting to make progress, we're starting to build the case. And the case is a very simple one. The case is, it doesn't matter what the Chamber of Commerce says, it doesn't matter what people who have enjoyed paid leave their entire lives tell us about what we shouldn't have. What matters is that if we want people to live healthy family lives and healthy economic lives at the same time, we have no choice but to make paid leave a reality. I've fought to pass tough bills like this by building coalitions around the state. When I'm governor, I'm going to do the same with family leave, but we shouldn't stop there. Family leave is part of a worldview that says anybody ought to be able to live a healthy, dignified family life and work at the same time. That means universal child care. That means universal home care for the aged. That means sick leave. That means having a society that's caught up to the way families live and exist in 2017 and doesn't pretend that we live in a world that probably never existed. The system that we have now is written by a few, for a few, and it's working really well for a few. The question we're facing right now is if we can take power back for the rest of us and build an economy that finally works for the rest of us. That's what I plan to do as governor.
Mr. Pritzker.
Well, not only passing paid medical leave, and Daniel brings up a couple of very good points about universal preschool, something that I've been fighting for a couple of decades now, and universal childcare. These are all coming after the paychecks, the take-home pay of families, of women. Paid medical leave is another way for us to fight back. I have also introduced a plan for universal health care, to move us toward universal health care. We need a plan, not that's 5 or 10 years away for the state of Illinois, but right away, that begins to allow people to access health care day one with a new governorship. So that plan, Illinois Cares, is, you remember President Obama suggested a public option back in 2009 as part of the Affordable Care Act. We can do that public option right here in the state of Illinois to allow middle-class families to get a break on the high cost of private health insurance that they're already paying for, and to allow people who are striving to get to the middle class to have a much lower cost option. We've got to get to, yes, paid medical leave, but when you're on the paid medical leave and you're actually accessing the healthcare system, it's got to be much less expensive than it is today. And that's why the plan that I put forward begins to move us toward universal health care right away.
Thank you.
Yeah, I support paid medical leave all the way, and a lot of the employers out here should definitely be a little bit more interested in making sure that their employees are seen as somewhat like family members, because the reality, everybody deserves paid medical leave. If you're willing to dedicate 40 hours of your work week to a company and just become an overachievers at different corporations, then those corporations should reciprocate that process with you by providing you with paid medical leave. We also have a lot of companies in Illinois right now that also offer paid medical leave right now. We do have some companies, like if a woman is pregnant, she has a child, you have companies out there that will facilitate the process and make sure that lady's taken care of. But we need to make this happen all throughout Illinois. So as your governor, I do support paid medical leave, and I will move forward to make sure it happens in all the corporations here in Illinois by meeting with them corporation CEOs, because the CEOs, these companies are making millions and billions of dollars. It's time out for playing games with the working class people, and we need a governor that's going to be a champion to take that bull by the horn and make sure that paid medical leave is a reality in Illinois. Okay.
Thank you.
That's good enough.
I believe in providing paid medical leave. I think the state ought to pass a law, force every company to do that. It's exactly what we did when I was running the merchandise mart. We did it because it was moral. We did it because it was ethical. And that moral and ethical dynamic, that mission statement, that value statement, helped to make us the employer of choice. It allowed us to attract people to work for our company who allowed the company to perform at a higher level than any of our competitors. Our goal was to become the employer of choice. Illinois can become the employer of choice as a government, and the state can be the state of choice to the next generation. We extended the benefits, and we extended it to, years before we had to non-married same-sex couples, because we wanted everyone to think of our company as the best employment opportunity for them. Over and over again, we talk about this issue and do so little to advance it. It's a Democratic issue. It's the core value of the Democratic Party. And yet, the Democratic Party controlled the supermajority in the House, a supermajority in the Senate. We control the governor's mansion, and we don't have it here in Illinois. We need to remove Bruce Rauner, but we need to look at ourselves. Are these the democratic values that represent the people here tonight? Or are they the democratic values that represent a series of insiders that have gotten control of the Democratic Party here in Illinois? Are they taking messaging votes, or are they trying to actually move legislation that makes us better? If you're the governor of the state, you can use executive authority to force a $35 billion a year supply chain to live up to these standards. And that's what I would do, and it would change the economy of our state.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So our next question has to do with equal pay. Some of you have touched on it in your remarks, but back in January of this year, January 21st to be exact, over 250,000 people, predominantly women, marched for a number of issues that impact women's lives, one of them being equal pay. What would you do as governor to ensure that women are paid equally? Because right now, you know, they make 3/4 of what men make in our state as well as our country. What would you do as governor?
Who goes?
I believe we'll
JB?
start with Teal.
Okay.
No,
right.
no, I'm sorry.
JB,
We'll start with
that's
Mr.
what I thought.
Pritzker. Yeah, sorry.
All right. Good.
Mr.
We should
Harvard,
go
sorry.
in order.
Well, the very first thing we need to do, you've heard it over and over again on this stage, that legislation has been passed, but not signed by Bruce Rauner. So the very first thing we've got to do is beat Bruce Rauner. Yep. And we need to fight hard to make sure that we're getting the kind of government, the kind of support for equal pay in the government, and that in the government itself that women are treated equally as far as pay, so we can control that as governor. Number two, we've got the laws on the books today that if they were enforced, we would get equal pay. But to me, here's the biggest thing that we can do. You know, startup and small businesses empower people, empower communities. And a majority of new businesses that get created and small businesses that get created in this state are created by women. We should be standing up. The Women's Business Development Center is a good example. Standing up for women creating new businesses means that we're putting women in power so that they can dictate, you can dictate equal pay in your organizations. Yes, we need to go enforce the law, but we also need to create empowerment to help you change the face of our society by controlling those jobs and making sure that women get equal pay in the workforce.
Thank you.
Yes, and quickly before I answer the question, because I talked about it a little bit already, I just want to thank one of my good friends, Marilyn Katz, for making sure that I was at this forum today, and Betty Magnus. But most important, my wife just attended Stand Up For. I want to salute my wife, Allison Hardiman, of 18 years. She's right there, everybody. She's here with us today. And we talked about equal pay early on, but under Blagojevich, Quinn, Ryan, and a long list of governors that's been in this governor's mansion since the inception of the state of Illinois, women have not been treated right. They have not received the same amount of pay, and it's not going to happen unless you have a governor that's going to step up to the plate and deal with this issue, make it a priority. You cannot put this on the back burner. So like I said, within the first 90 days of the Hardiman and Avey administration, we're going to make sure that women receive the same pay if they're doing the same job. And I'll just say this, and I always tell a few stories. My wife and I, we make about the same amount of money. Each of us make the same amount of money. So there's no big shot and all that kind of stuff going on, okay? And we need to make that a reality for women that are doing the same level of work, and stop playing games with the ladies out here. I just don't understand how it is the year 2017, once again, out of all the governors we've had, we're still struggling with this issue. It makes no sense. So we need to change this and then report back on it as soon as we make the changes, and we will do that within 90 days. Okay?
Thank you.
Chris Kennedy?
So this is a little wonky, but the merchandise mart, which I ran, was really controlled by a majority group of women, and this was a big issue for them, and I then wanted it to become a big issue for us. We ran 90 trade shows, and they were run all over North America and, in fact, the world. Each was managed by a different group, so there was very dispersed management. So there were lots of different values represented in the company. Not all those values were, well, let's say, similar around the issues of equal pay. Some people had, well, outward bias, and some had bias that they weren't aware of. So what we did is we basically graded every employee, either by title or grade, compensation level, and other ways. And then we looked at a matrix and said, okay, are women being paid equally? Are they being titled equally? And when we found discrepancies, we fixed those discrepancies. It's a very easy system to create and a very easy system to implement. Sometimes managers are embarrassed or chagrined, but they react incredibly positively if we give them the data and the help to make good decisions. We can do the exact same thing for everybody who works in state government. We can do it for every organization that the state controls, and we can force our supply chain, a $35 billion a year supply chain, to create those same internal reports for their organizations as well. If we do that, we'll change the culture in our state. People will be much more open to this data, and I'm telling you, because I've seen it in action, it will correct the problem. That's what I think we should do.
Thank you. Senator Biss.
So this problem is really severe. You mentioned that on average, women make less than 80 cents on the dollar that men make. The problem is more than a dime worse for Latin women, and yet more than another dime worse for African American women. It is catastrophic. And some states are taking important actions. And that's why, working with Representative Anna Moeller and key groups like Women Employed and the Shriver Center, I introduced legislation that would have given Illinois the strongest gender pay equity law in the country. We passed that bill. Bruce Rauner vetoed that bill. And it came time to override that veto. And it was a day about a month ago when the sexual harassment scandal was at a fever pitch in Springfield, and so we had sexual harassment training for state senators. For some inexplicable reason, we segregated by gender, but by party. So we had the Democrats in the Senate had their sexual harassment training in the morning. This is true. And the Republicans had their sexual harassment training in the afternoon. In between, we rushed to the Senate floor to try to override that veto of that equal pay bill, and we failed. We failed to find the votes to override that veto on a day we were supposed to be learning about sexual harassment. So when I talked in my introduction about systems of oppression, the connection between sexual harassment and economic empowerment from women, understand that that message has got to be pounded through the walls of the Capitol building. We got to pass strong equal pay laws here in the state of Illinois, but we can do more than that. I talked earlier about the loophole that allows servers at restaurants to be underpaid. That perpetuates gender pay inequality. We got to get rid of that. And finally, we have to use the full economic power of the state to empower women. I mentioned this earlier. The state pension funds have a tremendous amount of economic power because of the shares that they hold in corporations across America. Those come with seats in shareholder meetings. Vote to make sure that corporate America finally begins to have women play an equal role in leadership roles to men. That will solve a lot of gender workplace problems, from money to harassment to many others.
Thank you. What's going on in Washington right now? The tax bill, the Republican tax bill that the governor Rauner says he supports. I'm assuming you all do not support, but there are many voters that are looking for some changes and say, you got to do something to help us out here. So what's wrong with the Republican plan, and what would be a better plan instead? Mr. Hardiman.
Yeah, there's a lot wrong with the Republican plan because they're steady providing tax breaks for the wealthy people here in the United States. And we have to make sure here in the state of Illinois we push forward a progressive tax so we can begin to tax the wealthy people here in the state of Illinois. That's the best thing we can do. The progressive tax can bring in $2 billion of new revenue here in the state of Illinois. Donald Trump, this guy is one of the most narcissistic presidents we've ever had in the history of the United States. It's a lot wrong with it. I don't have time to get all the way deep into it, but I'll make sure as your governor in Illinois that we push forward that progressive tax, and then we have a tax scale of maybe 1 to 10%. If a person's making $35,000 a year, they get taxed 1 or 2%. If a person's making $250,000 or millions of dollars every year, they get taxed anywhere from 6 to 10%. We'll make sure that becomes a reality in Illinois. Illinois, and that's what needs to take place right now. And I just want to say that because it really upset me, and I just want to say this, when Senator Roy Moore said that America was great during slavery. My people, I trace my roots to a slave plantation in Louisiana. There was nothing great about America during slavery. Then he said the families were stronger. There was nothing great, okay? So Donald Trump, you know, hopefully he will be impeached, obstruction of justice, whatever the case may be. But this whole administration, everybody's lying. Everybody's playing games. And they're getting away with it because we have to continue to organize as regular working class and poor people and middle class people to make sure that Trump doesn't happen again. So I definitely, that's what I would do in Illinois. Because what they're doing in Washington is all about big money politics. That's why we need somebody that represents the working class, poor people, and middle class people as governor of Illinois. And that's T.O. Hardeman. And I don't want to sound like I'm so cocky. I want to make that clear. I'm very humble. I listen to people. This is not just about T.O. It's about a movement of people. Okay? That's my plan there. Unless you got a follow-up question.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
What was the question? Can I explain what's wrong with the tax bill?
No, we get it that you don't like the plan,
Yeah.
but what would you do instead?
Well, sometimes the best thing to do is nothing. I mean, honestly, why make a situation worse? And they're going to make a situation worse. That tax bill, it's bad for the American economy, it's bad for the United States, and it's terrible for Illinois, and it's bad for the world. It's bad for the United States because it could accelerate the economic differential that's occurred since the Reagan administration. We're going to tax people who don't earn money, who don't work for a living, who don't earn a salary at a lower rate than the people who earn a salary. Just start there. That's morally wrong, it's ethically wrong, it's a violation of anybody's idea of social justice. Let's just start with that principle. That's why it's bad for our economy. It's going to accelerate the differential between the rich and the poor. And it's going to accelerate the opportunity differential between the rich and the poor. We're going to get further and further away from what made this country unique among every country in the world. The notion of endless opportunity, upward mobility, the American dream, the land of opportunity. That won't be available to anyone unless they're born into the super rich. Today, if you're born poor in America, you'll probably stay poor. If you're born wealthy, you'll probably stay wealthy. If you're born in between, you're going to have a life of constant threat and hazard. That is not the promise of our country. Making the rich richer is not going to fix that problem. The Trump voter around the United States voted for him because they're pissed, they're raging, they're angry that the promise of this country has not been kept. They feel that they can't make it anymore, and they're right. And now we're going to complicate their lives. He's going to screw the very people who supported him. And that's not right. It's a disaster for our state. It's going to defund. It's going to limit the amount of money coming into our universities, our urban core. And Bruce Rauner should fight it tooth and nail.
Senator Biss.
This tax scam is a perfect illustration of what's wrong in American politics today. Look who's in charge. Look at the congressman who actually said what the rest of them were thinking. He said, listen, if my donors are telling me if we don't pass this bill that I'm never supposed to call them again. Good, don't call, it's fine. Stop, just stop. This is a hostile takeover on the part of the very, very, very rich. And Donald Trump ran on a platform of I'm going to tax the rich and help the middle class and the poor, and nobody should be surprised that he got in to do the exact opposite. Watch that example carefully when we think about the future of politics we want in this country and the future of politics that we want in this state. What should they have done? They should have done what they said they were going to do. They should have closed the corrupt carried interest tax loophole, a corrupt loophole that allows private equity and hedge fund managers to pretend that their income is not income. I'm not making this up. They pretend their income is not income, and in so doing get a 19.6% tax cut. Donald Trump said he was going to close that. Did it happen? No, of course it didn't happen. Look who's really in charge. But I have a bill in Springfield to do that. I have a bill in Springfield that says we know Donald Trump's not going to fix it. We're going to close that loophole here. I'm fighting to pass that bill. I got it out of the state Senate, first state legislative chamber in the country to pass such a bill. It's stalled in the House. It's a fundamental difference between the candidates on this stage. We need to have a tax code that follows the modern economy, and the modern economy is one where more and more and more money is in the hand of fewer and fewer and fewer, where the financial sector is burgeoning and wages are lower, and we have to go find the money where it is. When I'm governor, I'm going to push the federal government to do the right thing, unlike our current governor. But on the state level, we can do the right thing here, and that's got to be the first priority.
Thank you.
It's true. We need a governor who's actually going to stand up to Donald Trump and stand up to the Republicans in Washington. And this governor has been utterly silent, embarrassingly so. Yesterday, I was proud to receive the endorsement of Senator Dick Durbin, Senator Tammy Duckworth in this campaign. And Senator Durbin said something very important to me. He said that in the last 3 years, since Bruce Rauner became governor, he has not received one phone call from Governor Rauner advocating for anything on the federal level for the people of Illinois. That's shameful. It's reprehensible. It is incumbent upon the governor of the state of Illinois, whoever he or she may be, to stand up and fight for the people of Illinois. And that means talking to our most senior representatives in Washington and advocating for change, advocating for the people. Now, one of the horrific portions of the bill that is unconscionable, that they've now passed in Washington, is taking away the deduction for state and local taxes, which affects 2 million people across the state of Illinois. Another is that more than 1 million people in Illinois may lose their health insurance. And a third is that if you're going to keep your health insurance and you've got a private health insurance plan, it is likely that your premiums will go up, and all for the purpose, Donald Trump's purpose, the GOP's purpose, to give a massive tax break to the wealthiest Americans. It's wrong. We need a progressive income tax in this state, precisely why we need to defeat the bill in Washington that we're now going to have to live with. It's why we've got to go fight hard, not just in 2018 to take out this governor, but in 2020 to take out Donald Trump.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy, while the elimination of child care subsidies was reversed, child care is still underfunded and more expensive for families than it has been in the past, eating away at family incomes, particularly those of women who are the single heads of household and reliant on affordable child care. This is something that our union works on every day because we represent, I don't know, it's probably more like 30, 40,000 women who do child care every day for women who are out here working and those who are single and don't have other supports. What would you do to remedy this situation that forces women into these circumstances? And let me just also add that Women's March of Chicago has been supporter and proponent of making sure that women of all communities throughout this state have enough child care and affordable child care so that they can work and go to school and do what they need to do for their families. What would you do to support that?
The really sick stuff about what you're describing, the crazy stuff, is the poverty level compensation that child care workers get in the state of Illinois. And reimbursement of, I don't know, $20 a day or less per kid, and Governor Rauner wants to cut that. There's no ethical, moral, economic justification for doing so. What we want in the United States, what we want more than anything else, is that notion that makes our country different than any other. We want, well, endless economic upward mobility. We want anybody to be able to make it here. We want it to be the land of opportunity. If we take away access to child care, if we pay poverty wages, we destroy the very thing that makes our country unique in the world. He's attacking the American dream. And it doesn't have to, it doesn't have to be like that. We can provide health care, we can provide child care, we can provide everything we need to restore the American dream in an economically efficient way, because anybody who can then go to school, get another job, take care of themselves, reduces the cost of government, reduces the dependence on programs, and expands their own ability to contribute to the common weal. That's what we want. What we have is something radically different. We have in the city of Chicago a relentless attack by the city government to push people of color out of the city of Chicago. And then we're using that same strategic gentrification at the state level to push people who are poor out of the state. If you think that's an exaggeration, let me tell you one fact. The state of Illinois, its economy shrunk, and yet average household income jumped 11% in the last 2 years. Not because compensation went up, not because people's pay increased, but because we pushed the poor out of Illinois, and that needs to end.
Thank you. Senator Biss?
We need universal child care in Illinois. Let's just be clear. We have a society where we pretend that families don't need child care subsidies, even though there are so many single-parent households in Illinois. Yes, of course, most headed by women. There are so many dual-income households in Illinois. Dual-income households, dual income because they need both incomes to survive. And the price of child care is through the roof, and we pretend that that's somehow okay. It's unconscionable. I have fought for child care expansion in the State House, but my work has paled by comparison to the extraordinary ferocity of my Lieutenant Governor, Letisa Wallace, who has been a passionate and effective fighter for expanded child care in the state capitol. Now, one of the first things Bruce Rauner did as governor was unilaterally slash child care so that we had one of by far the stingiest child care program of any state in the union. How immoral is that? What many people don't know is that when it was mostly restored, one component that was not restored was access to child care if you were a full-time student enrolled in higher education. Think about that one for a second. Think about the message that Bruce Rauner was sending single parents who are trying to put themselves through school to improve their economic opportunity and that of their children. He was saying, no chance for you. It's wrong, it's immoral, and it's eating our economic future. And now that the child care levels are entirely restored back to where they were before Bruce Rauner started wreaking havoc, guess what? Because of the complicated eligibility process, there's still tens of thousands of families that somehow never found their way back in and lack access to child care that would have otherwise been entitled to. This is not right. This is not fair. This is not just. And it's the consequence of a system that doesn't treat every family as equally entitled to a real shot at a middle-class life. When I'm governor, we're going to fight for universal child care and treat everyone the same.
Thank you.
Well, I've said to you earlier in this forum that I've spent more than 20 years on this subject and traveled the nation educating governors and educating and testifying before Congress and here in Springfield and across Illinois. I'll just say this briefly. It is unconscionable to me that we do not provide universal access to preschool, universal access, by the way, to full-day kindergarten, and universal access to affordable childcare, or make it free for those who cannot afford childcare. It should not eat up a family's income to take care of a child and hold a job. It's crazy to me. And over these many years, I have watched as the kitchen table budget for most families has gotten eaten away slowly but surely, in part by childcare expenses that honestly all of us should stand up and make sure that we are paying for. It's best for a child if we have quality childcare. I have fought to expand that in the state. Thousands of kids, at-risk kids in the state, get quality childcare and quality preschool because of the work that I have done. Universal childcare, universal preschool, extraordinarily important, but I just want to be clear that this doesn't happen by itself. You need a plan. I put forward a plan for doing that. You can find it on my website, and rather than go through all the points of it, just know that over 20 plus years, this has been a passion for me.
Thank you.
Yeah, Hardeman Navy, we also support universal child care all the way, and the way we're going to really support universal child care, mouth getting kind of dry up here, I don't know whether it's the room or whatever, but that's why I'm drinking all this water. But the thing is this, we support universal child care, and also the way we're going to fund it is out of House Bill 453, because we could talk about universal child care, but there needs to be a funding source. So I plan to take a few $1 million out of the House Bill 453, which is the financial transaction tax, and make sure that we fund universal child care here in the state of Illinois. And this should be a no-brainer for any governor or any leader in the state of Illinois. We must look out for our children to the best of our ability, because the children are our future, and we shouldn't play with that issue there at all. So that's, I'll just keep it brief with that response. Thank you.
All right, next question on immigration. Illinois has been praised for its progressive immigration stance and the passage of the Trust Act. However, it's clear that the Trump administration will not stop its efforts to harass, intimidate, and countermand state and home rules. What will you do as governor to protect the many, many undocumented men, women, and children who do reside here and who do work here? Senator Biss.
Shortly after the election of Donald Trump, I still find it hard to say that. Anyway, shortly after the election, I visited Evanston Township High School and sat with a group of Dreamer students who were scared to death for themselves and for their parents, scared of coming home to an empty house one night. And I didn't sugarcoat the situation. I didn't pretend to them that as their state senator I could do something about federal immigration policy, but I said that I will do every single thing in my power as a human, as a citizen, as a person with a platform, and as a state legislator to make sure that we stand with all of our fellow Illinois residents, regardless of immigration status, regardless of documentation. I've fought to do just that. So yes, I was a proud co-sponsor of the Trust Act, and I'm glad that that bill was signed into law, but man, it should have gone further. It should not have been watered down to get those last few votes in the House. There is more that we could do. Illinois should ban the use of state resources to collaborate with the production, God forbid, of a federal registry of Muslims. Illinois should not allow a situation where people are afraid to report the fact that they're victims of a violent crime because of their immigration status. We can do so much more, but we also need to work on the local level. After that meeting in that high school, I worked with the local high school and elementary school district and the local communities to pass strong, welcoming ordinances in every unit of local government there is. We need a governor who's going to show up at city council and village board meetings and school board meetings and say, we're going to work together to make sure that every single public body in the state of Illinois is standing shoulder to shoulder in support of our fellow Illinois residents who are under attack. There's going to be pressure on us not to take these strong stances because Donald Trump is going to threaten to withhold federal money. And I would say we are presented with a moral decision. Are we going to stand with people or are we going to stand with dollars? When I'm governor, we're going to stand with people.
The Trust Act that Donald Trump abhors, that Bruce Rauner reluctantly signed, isn't nearly enough to protect our undocumented immigrants here in this state. There were provisions, Senator mentioned, there are provisions that were taken out of the Trust Act, and those provisions need to be put back, and I think everybody on this stage would stand for that, making sure that we are preventing the collection of names in a Muslim registry. And indeed, even without that, I would suggest to all of you, and I will be first in line, that if they demand that people register as Muslims, that all of us should go and register as Muslims. We have to expand refugee services, of course, in the state, and we have to protect our dreamers and expand the U-visa provisions in the state. This should be a welcoming state. You know, the state of Pennsylvania's governor went to the airport in 2015 to welcome the Syrian refugees to Pennsylvania. Our governor announced he didn't want any refugees in this state. So changing out the governor is a critically important provision here for making sure that we're going to actually be the kind of state that I think all of us in this room want us to be, welcoming to immigrants. My own family came to this country with nothing. My great-grandfather, 10 years old, showed up here. He had nothing, and it was a social service agency that gave him a place to live. It was a good public school that allowed him to learn English and get a good education. It was a public university that allowed him to get a higher education. And the bounty of that has come to us, though these many generations later. We ought to be providing those same things for immigrants to this state today.
All right. Yeah, I got my voice back now. So this was going on. You know, the Hardeman and Avery administration, we definitely support the Trust Act. I've stood up against the bombings in Syria before. I've stood up against mass deportations in Broadview and down on Aston, standing up with the immigrant community here in Chicago and abroad. So Hardeman and the Avery administration, we support sanctuary state and the sanctuary cities. We're gonna fight Donald Trump every step of the way when it comes down to this issue. Donald Trump just recently declared Jerusalem the capital of Israel, of the Israeli government. What he's doing is he's stirring up a lot of mess throughout the world. There had been a little peace over in Palestine, but since Donald Trump declared Jerusalem to be the capital of Israel, you've had people that have lost their lives and people have been hurt over there. This is totally unacceptable. As your governor, I plan to stand with the immigrant population here, because the truth of the matter that we all come here from distant lands. My ancestors came over here in the bottom of slave ships. We've never been immigrants, and we had Ben Carson, who happens to be African American, who said that that we were coming over here as immigrants as well. One of our own African American so-called leaders said that we came over here as immigrants. We came over here as we were forced into slavery. And don't take this the wrong way, my people. I'm not an angry black man. I want to make that clear. I'm just presenting facts to you in regards to this issue, and that's why I stand up with immigrants all the way, and that's what we will do. Now, people that are undocumented, we plan to make sure they have a pathway to citizenship as we move along, because people have to be registered here. And when it comes down to the Palestinian people, I really sympathize with the Palestinians over there. I know the whole history on how everything came about back in Palestine at the time. So we, as Americans, I'm a patriot. I love my country. And my job as governor is to unify everybody in Illinois and unify everybody throughout our country, also on these issues of immigration, because we must support our immigrant population. Thanks again. All right.
I don't know how else to say it, but I don't think we want the nation of immigrants to become the nation of orphans. I don't think we want to deport a bunch of people's young children's parents and leave orphans in America. I don't think we want to deport a bunch of kids and make them orphans in other countries. That's not our value system in the United States. We often argue over the wrong issues here. How do we defend the folks that the federal government is now attacking? The question that we should be asking is, how is the federal government going to give a path to citizenship to everybody living in the United States? That's the question that we should ask as Democrats. How are we going to give a path to citizenship to everybody in the United States? We need to resist any cooperation with the federal government and Donald Trump's efforts to round up undocumented in the United States. We cannot allow resources in the state of Illinois to be used in that effort. We need to restore the immigrant support line item in our state budget. We used to help people become citizens of the United States. We thought that that was a proper role of government, and Bruce Rauner has zeroed that out and made no effort to provide support. We have good laws in Illinois, some of the best, but in the city of Chicago, we continue to expose people to incredible vulnerability by allowing ICE and others access to gang databases, which is a way around the sanctuary city movement, and that needs to, well, that needs to end. Immigrants are America. We shouldn't stop them from becoming Americans. We ought to start with that premise and let everything else flow from that.
We're going to switch now. So many of you have submitted questions. Well, we still have a lot of our questions, but we're going to switch to all of your questions and now ask, but we'd like to get a lot of them in. So if we could move the process and perhaps just a 1-minute answer, please, to the questions from the audience. Jackie, go ahead.
We have a whole basket. We want to get as many in as possible. First question from the audience is with regard to right to work. So, Mr. Pritzker, do you support right to work? And if so, why? And if not, and I'm going to augment this a little bit because this is certainly very dear to me, how would you keep the state of Illinois from becoming a right to work state? And are you a proponent or in favor of allowing people to organize if they so choose?
I'm a strong proponent of collective bargaining rights. I have stood up against right to work and believe, by the way, that for those of you who may not know, the concept of right to work, it really means right to work for less money. That's really what they're saying, destroy the unions. This is the Koch brothers agenda. It's the agenda that Bruce Rauner brought into office. It was hidden under that Carhartt jacket when he got elected. And it says at the top of it, destroy the unions, right to work for less money, right? And then the second thing is workplaces will be less safe. Those are things that he thinks are good for creating jobs in the state. I don't want a governor who wants to lower wages in the state and who wants to lower workplace safety in the state. You want a governor who wakes up every day trying to make people's lives better, trying to raise wages in the state. And labor unions are the backbone of the middle class. Labor unions created the good wages that people get in this state. We ought to be standing up for labor unions. I'll be a very strong advocate. I've been proud to have the endorsement of the statewide AFL-CIO and almost 30 unions all across the state, and I will stand up for labor unions as governor of the state of Illinois.
Mr. Hardeman.
Yeah, we're totally against the right to work process as well. I'm a former union employee myself. I salute the work that all the unions have done to protect workers here statewide and throughout the United States. We need a governor that's going to really lead that charge. Bruce Rauner recently said that he was not in charge. So why is he still in office? Somebody did answer that question for me. Why is he still there? So the unions are very important. They're a part of American history. Let's do the best we can to support workers statewide. And as your governor, I'm definitely pro-union, and that's my response.
Okay. Well, I think unions are a competitive advantage. They certainly were with every business that I ever ran. I ran an all-union business, competed with non-union competitors in places like Atlanta and Dallas, and beat them day in and day out because we had the best workers in the United States working at the merchandise mart. That's what I believe. I think right to work is a disaster. It doesn't help an economy. It doesn't help higher ed. It doesn't help K through 12 education. It doesn't help a state. It doesn't help society. It's a distraction that Governor Rauner uses to have us fight over while he tries to pursue a libertarian agenda. I told you that we had more companies move to the merchandise mart to open an office for the first time in Illinois than any other location in the state. I dealt with more than 5,000 companies. Not one of them ever asked me about right to work, workers' comp, tort reform, how we draw our maps, or term limits. It's a distraction. It won't help our economy.
Thank you.
Right to work is a horrendous idea. Let's talk about why. Bruce Rauner's theory of economic growth is the theory that got us to this spot of grotesque economic inequality that has taken over our country. The theory is that we are going to make our state as attractive as possible for bottom-feeding corporations that are scouring the globe looking for the cheapest place to hire. And if that works, you'll have a lot more minimum wage jobs and nothing else. The truth is there's a better way to grow an economy, and that's with investing in people, investing in education, raising wages, and having a growing middle class. But let's have some truth now. The labor movement has shrunk over the course of the last decades. Part of that's because of bad public policy that we've got to reverse, but part of that's because the economy has changed. Thank you to SEIU for building new organizing models that organize new collections of workers and help us grow union density, but we need to figure out what to do about the part-time workers and temp workers, workers in the sharing economy, workers who are employed by staffing agencies who are being screwed over by a meat grinder economy and don't have solidarity. We need to build new models of solidarity for a 21st century economy.
Thank you. Several people are asking about an elected school board. Where do you stand on an elected school board for Chicago? What about the new voucher system? And then, let's throw this one in, if you could all do this in 1 minute. Charter schools, should they be expanded? Should we stop? Where do you stand on charter schools? Elected school board, the new vouchers, and charters. Mr. Hardeman.
Well, I definitely support an elected school board here in Chicago. I've gone on record saying I support an elected school board. The voucher system is something that was created. I'm not in agreement with the voucher system at all. When it comes down to charter schools should not be going downstate trying to get funding for charter schools. They're in direct competition with public schools, and we need to stop that practice immediately. The charter schools were funded by a lot of wealthy people, and they should keep funding those schools, and in the meantime, allow state government to take care of public schools. So that's why I stand on those issues.
I think the charter school movement, we should keep the number of charters that we have until we fix them. There's no accountability, no oversight. Until we fix that entire system, I wouldn't come near expanding them. The voucher system is a clear violation of the state constitution. Anybody can read the thing. It's the most plain language in the world, and that voucher system that we just passed is a violation of the state constitution. The school board issue is really the key issue. We're totally underfunding the schools in Chicago. We underfund them because we pay for them with local property taxes. If anybody's been reading the paper, you can see that system is entirely corrupt. The Democratic chairman of the Cook County Democratic Party is the Cook County assessor, and he's been under-assessing the big commercial properties for years and years. That robs the school system of adequate funding. In the old days, well, if it was independent, it would file undervaluation complaints and fix the system. And without that check and balance, the corruption continues.
Oh, look, the Chicago Public School District is going to get another CEO. How often does that happen? How often does that happen? Maybe they should be governed differently. I don't know. It doesn't seem to be working. I live in a suburb. We have elections for our school boards. Candidates run for the office. They tell us what they're going to do. Then we vote for the ones we like, and the schools run the way we want it to. In Chicago, you have corruption scandals and school closings and communities that don't have the voice to speak up for themselves. It's wrong. We need an elected school board. I'm a proud co-sponsor of that bill. That voucher program and that bill that passed a few months ago, listen, I'm a lifelong crusader for school funding reform, but I voted no on that bill because that voucher program was immoral. It is wrong. I will always fight vouchers, and when I'm governor, we're going to repeal that voucher program. Finally, of course we need a moratorium on charter schools. They're closing down neighborhood schools. That's not a time to open charter schools. We need a moratorium on charter schools, and I was proud to vote for a bill that stops the Charter School Commission from being able to override local preferences and install charter schools against the wishes of the community. That's wrong, too.
Okay, thank
One more
you.
from Mr. Pritzker.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
We need an elected school board in part because right now the people of the city of Chicago have taxation without representation. Closing 4 schools in Englewood, a decision not made by anybody in the neighborhood, is going to displace kids who should not be displaced. Yes, we should build a gleaming new high school in Englewood, but those kids should not be scattered about the schools in Chicago Public Schools just because some unelected people decided that they ought to, do away with those 4 schools. There aren't enough kids. Why do you think there aren't enough kids in those schools? If you defund schools and you take away wraparound services and you take away teachers, of course people aren't going to school there. And if you fundamentally don't work to create prosperity in neighborhoods, people are going to leave. That is underlying many of the problems with our public schools. So an elected school board will help an awful lot to avoid this displacement. We need to do away with the idea, the $75 million that got taken out of the public schools to fund basically a tax break for wealthy people that Bruce Rauner and Betsy DeVos favor. Sorry. Third, can I just say about charters? I am foursquare in favor of a moratorium on the expansion of charters, and frankly, we ought to be taking charters away from charter schools that are not meeting standards in the city of Chicago.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Kennedy. So racial injustice and disinvestment in low-income minority neighborhoods is a woman's issue. What are your qualifications and plans for reinvesting in communities, fighting gentrification, and making sure that people are invested in rather than disinvested in?
I think it's a basic difference in philosophy between the mayor of the city of Chicago and the governor of the state of Illinois. I think we're using strategic gentrification to push people of color out of the city of Chicago. And I think the major newspapers are cheering the mayor on in that effort, saying that it's good to get rid of poor African Americans and replace them with wealthy whites, Asians, and to some degree blacks. That's what the newspapers say. I think it's wrong. The way it works, though, is it's so simple. It's like a 4-part plan. Close the neighborhood school, rob the community of its heart and soul, so there's no reason to fight for it anymore. But do that first. Then shut down access to a local hospital. And if you've got a sick kid like one of ours and need to access the hospital, you're almost forced to leave. 3, reduce the number of community police officers in the community so that crime goes up. 4, you want to seal the deal? Let the local grocery store close without threatening their locations around the city. I'll stop all of that and stop what's happening at the state as well.
Thank you. Senator Biss?
Thank you for asking that question in those exact words. The word is disinvestment. The phenomenon is money being pulled out of neighborhoods, not for years or even decades, but for generations, of the state and the city acting as though certain communities are just beyond repair. And eventually, if you pull enough dollars out of a neighborhood, the neighborhood will become beyond repair. The solution to disinvestment, and hear me on this is crucial. It's not a theory. It's not a job training program. It's not some kind of economic policy. The solution to disinvestment is investment. And the way to solve this problem is to put dollars back in neighborhoods and put people to work in these neighborhoods. Not, by the way, to import people from somewhere else to do jobs in these neighborhoods, as has been the habit in this state for far too long, but to directly invest, put people to work, and understand that once you do that and reverse the cycle of poverty, other investment and job opportunity will follow. We've acted for way too long as if it's not our responsibility to tap into the hope and potential that exists in every neighborhood. It is our responsibility. When I'm governor, we're going to act like it.
Mr. Pritzker?
Well, we do need investment in our communities, but you have to have an actual plan to get that done. And I put forward a plan that will help us bring prosperity back to the forgotten neighborhoods, the neighborhoods that have been left out, the neighborhoods that have been disinvested from. Many of them black and brown families living in those neighborhoods. We've got to start, by the way, with getting rid of the prohibition on rent control. For those who, those communities that want to have rent control should have the ability to do it. In our state, we've prohibited those communities from imposing rent control. That will help significantly with gentrification. Second, this is about creating jobs. you have to have a plan for creating jobs in neighborhoods, and I have put one forward. It allows us at the state level to provide small business loans and microloans in those neighborhoods so that people who live in those neighborhoods can create jobs in those neighborhoods. They will not only do that, but create profit in the neighborhood, and because they live there, when they reinvest, they'll expand. Lastly, we need to invest in the safety net. The very organizations that have been shut down because of Bruce Rauner's failures at the state level are those in these forgotten, poorest neighborhoods all around our state.
Thank you.
Well, I actually come from some of them poor neighborhoods that we're talking about. I lived in the Austin community, West Garfield, West Humboldt Park. This is the thing. We need a governor that's also going to stand up against Rahm Emanuel. Seriously, and just let that resonate for a second, people. But this is the thing. As governor, one of the reasons I'm running for governor, I'm running as a wake-up call for the entire state, because for far too long, communities, black and brown communities, have been losing investments because of the wrong people have been put in power. We've had the same stereotypical type of individuals running for governor, withholding resources from poor and distressed communities. When I become governor, part of my 2020 plan is to rebuild Inglewood, rebuild Austin, rebuild East St. Louis, Decatur, Peoria, some parts of Springfield, Illinois, Kankakee, Danville, even up in Waukegan, North Chicago. My plan is to help build some of these communities so that people can have a quality of life that's, that you can compare to any other quality of life out here. I appreciate Chris Kennedy talking about how they're over-assessing people's houses in Dalton, Riverdale, Calumet City, Calumet Park, and people are losing their houses. And when you lose your house, you've lost everything. And we need a governor that's going to talk like I'm talking now, but most important, have an action plan to back it up, and that's part of the Hardeman and Avery 2020 plan.
Thank you. Several folks in the audience want to know where you all stand on legalizing marijuana. The difference between medical marijuana and recreational marijuana. Let's start with Senator Biss. Where do you stand?
I'm for legalizing marijuana, and here's why. Marijuana laws are not applied equally. This is a matter of racial justice. That's what this is about. The way in which marijuana laws are applied at New Trier High School are completely different than how they're applied at black and brown communities. That's wrong. And we've talked about that forever, and we've pretended we're going to fix it forever. The way to fix it is to legalize it. That's why I'm a proud co-sponsor of Senate Bill 316. When I'm governor, we're going to pass that bill. I'm going to sign that bill.
Mr. Pritzker.
We should legalize it and tax it. There's $350 million to $700 million of revenue for this state. But it isn't just for the money. It is, in part, about criminal justice reform, and some of that money should be dedicated to criminal justice reform. It is also about safety. It is readily available. Let's face it. You can find it. It's readily available, but it isn't necessarily safe. We can make it safe. We ought to make it safe. That's maybe one of the bigger reasons. Yes, I want the tax revenue for our state because we have things that we need to pay for, priorities of the state, including education. But boy, criminal justice reform and safety are two pretty darn good reasons to make it happen.
I'm in support of legalizing marijuana with some serious restrictions to that particular initiative because, believe it or not, I have a lot of 8th graders, high school students that look up to me. And I don't want high school students and 8th graders thinking it's okay to smoke marijuana. Marijuana has been proven to be a gateway drug along with alcohol and tobacco that leads people to using higher level drugs. Not in every case, but in addiction studies, you will see the correlation there. So as the governor and as a leader of the state of Illinois, I definitely agree with legalizing marijuana, but we need to put serious restrictions on how we go about the business there. We need to decriminalize marijuana because too many people have been incarcerated for long times for marijuana, and everybody else is just getting away with whatever they want to get away with. So as your governor, I'm a leader, and I have to tell the truth. I'm not trying to sound good or try to people please when it comes down to our children. And I don't think nobody in the audience would like to see 8th graders and high school students thinking it's okay to smoke marijuana. Seriously. It's not all about the money. We need the money, but we can also find other avenues to raise the money. But before you leave out of here, I just want you to know that we do agree with legalizing it so people won't be confused. Thanks again. All right.
So I talked to Governor Hickenlooper about this, and he said, well, they'd rushed into it in Colorado, and that there were a whole series of issues that came from the quick and swift action of elected officials responding to polling data. He said, he said to me when he and I were younger that you couldn't overdose on marijuana, but now the THC contents can be concentrated to a degree where someone can overdose, and that needs to be regulated. You said that the packaging that they originally allowed for didn't have tamper-proof seals. It allowed children to access it, and that was wrong. You said the delivery, the fact that it came shaped like little gummy bears made it attractive to children who ended up in Children's Hospital there in Denver. And his advice to me, which I take, is that we should give ourselves a period of study, have an institution like the University of Illinois, put a time restriction on it, say 6 months, and embrace whatever recommendations they have.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Got another question for you, Mr. Pritzker, and this is related to Michael Madigan. So recently, the governor said that Michael Madigan runs the state and not him. How would you propose to work with Michael Madigan?
Yep, that was Governor Rauner saying he's not in charge. Well, I will be in charge. First of all, I'm an independent leader, an independent thinker. I've been that way my whole life, and there are going to be things that I'll disagree with Speaker Madigan or President Cullerton about, and there are things that I will agree with them about. For example, I'm in favor of independently drawn maps. I think we should have more competitive elections in the state of Illinois. I'm pretty sure that the Speaker of the House does not agree with me about that. I'm in favor of leadership term limits for our legislative leaders, and I'm pretty sure that he doesn't agree with me about that. But unlike Bruce Rauner, I intend to go to Springfield and work with our legislative leaders on the things that matter to the people of Illinois, and to stand up for you. The people of Illinois are who I work for, no one else.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, Mike Madigan has been in office for a long time now, and once I become the governor, I would have to work with Mike Madigan, but I'm not going to agree with everything that Mike Madigan puts forward. That's very important. Bruce Rauner ran on a campaign slogan saying he was going to shake up Springfield, but the only people Bruce Rauner shook up was the working class and poor people of Illinois. So as your governor, we can't play with this Mike Madigan issue. He's a Speaker of the House until he gets voted out. But when I become governor, once again, like I said, I'll work with him on what we agree upon, and whatever we do not agree on, we would have to look at a compromise somewhere along the way to make sure that we move the state forward. Because Bruce Rauner going to Springfield with that mindset, he didn't want to really compromise. That's what got the state into the predicament the state is in right now. And we need a governor that's going to be what you might say, a bridge builder, somebody that can cross the aisle and work with everybody. And currently, I already have a good relationship with about 80% of the General Assembly right now. I've had about 20 years experience working with a lot of members of the General Assembly.
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy.
People ask me what kind of Democrat I am. I say I'm a Kennedy Democrat, a Ted Kennedy Democrat. Teddy was one of those progressive and liberal members of the Senate, but he always had friends in the opposite party. He never took all of this personally, and he could work with anyone. I feel that that's my attitude as well. I have a special concern, though, because this isn't a personality issue or conflict of character. It's an issue about money. The state of Illinois, the government itself, needs more money. We need a progressive graduated income tax. That's how we're going to fund our schools. That's how we're going to fund public safety. There's no other way around it. The problem is the Democrats control the supermajority in the House, the supermajority in the Senate, control the governor's mansion, and didn't move towards that system. They didn't do it because people like the Speaker have outside jobs as property tax appeals lawyers. They're making money on a system that's destroying our education and allowing crime to take the lives of thousands of people in our major cities. We need to ban elected officials from having outside jobs that are adverse to the interests of the body they were elected to serve.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, what is Bruce Rauner even talking about? Well, why is he running for re-election, honestly? Can someone explain this to me? It's embarrassing. He's genuinely just out there embarrassing himself. But listen, let's talk about Mike Madigan. He's been there too long. He's too powerful. I've said that for a long time. I've been fighting to limit how long someone can serve as Speaker. This is fundamental. It's important. And let's just be really direct about what's going on here. Bruce Rauner has chosen to be governor in the way of just turning everything into a personal fight with Mike Madigan. That's terrible for the state of Illinois. J.B. Pritzker is Mike Madigan's candidate for governor. I don't think that's the right way forward for the Democratic Party. I think we ought to have a new generation of real independence from the Speaker, because I think his leadership, which has gone on for a very long time and has amassed an extraordinary amount of power, has held the state back and has held the Democratic Party back. And I think the right way forward is someone who will work with everyone, who has a record of accomplishment in the legislature, but is genuinely independent.
JB, would you like to respond?
I would like to respond. First of all, who here on this stage voted for Mike Madigan for Speaker? Yeah, the guy at the end of the table here. Daniel Biss voted for Mike Madigan for Speaker and voted for his rules. So it's, hypocrisy. Let me say that, I have fought my entire life to change people's lives across the state of Illinois, to make their lives better. When I become governor, I'm going to take that same record and go fight hard to put working families back in charge. It doesn't matter who the Speaker of the House is or who the President of the Senate is. It's the agenda that I carry with me that I'm going to fight for.
Senator Biss, would you respond? I know, he gets to have one last word.
Well, first of all, in my opinion, it does matter who the Speaker of the House and the Senate President are. I think it certainly matters. But I will say, yes, I did vote for Mike Madigan for Speaker. He was the Democratic candidate for Speaker, and I'm a proud Democrat. And I'm going to work with everyone in the legislature, including him, and I'll work with him to elect the Democratic nominee for governor, whoever that person is. You can be a loyal Democrat and be independent as well. That's what I am.
Can I say something?
Sure.
The only thing I want to say, people, that's why you should vote for me. I have nothing to do with none of that mess.
All right, I think before we wrap up, I wonder if you could just quickly, and it doesn't have to be a whole minute, can you name 3 women not related to you who you have promoted perhaps at work, who you turn to for advice and counsel, who helped shape your opinions? Name 3 women not related to you. Tio, you're first.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
Just quickly.
Okay, quickly. Mary Nelson, she's the former founder of Bethel New Life. She's one of my, confidants, and I've worked with her for many years. Amina Matthews is a young lady that was one of my first violence interrupters. She's an international humanitarian now, world humanitarian. She's not related to me. Did a lot of work saving lives here in Chicago, throughout. And I'm trying to, because I didn't expect this question, I got to think about one more young lady. Now, I have a young lady that's working on our staff. Her name is Dominique Davis, and she's basically a lady that I go to for strategy when it comes down to overall, ground strategy. And I look for her for some type of leadership in that area.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Mr. Kennedy.
So I'd go with Susan McCullough, who I worked with for 25 years at the Merchandise Mart, ran the apparel business, ran trade shows all over the United States, incredible business person, strategic in her thinking, incredible tactics, and enormous social and emotional IQ. I'd say in terms of business, I'd probably look up to Melody Hobson. I've served on the Ariel Mutual Funds Board of Directors for 25 years, and I think she's incredible. And then I'd go with Linda Loving, who's a volunteer at Top Box Foods and has been helping me and my wife Sheila run that organization for the last 5 years.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Biss.
30 seconds.
I'll start with my running mate, Letisa Wallace, an extraordinary leader who has taught me a great deal about advocacy for her community and about the kind of policies we need to enact here in the state of Illinois. I think of Marjorie Benton, who's a constituent of mine in Evanston, one of the co-founders of the Chicago Foundation for Women, and someone who's become become a confidant on almost a daily basis as I think about the historical context and also the future of the state of Illinois. And then I think about the first person I ever hired, Allison Leipziger, who ran my district office. Most of you probably haven't heard of her, but she helped me think in a profound way about what public service is about, and she's someone who, when the hardest questions come up now, she's usually the last phone call I make.
Mr. Pritzker.
Well, I'll start with, the senator kind of stole one line from me, which is, of course, my Lieutenant Governor, Juliana Stratton, who is amazing. But I'll skip over that and move on to the general counsel of our business, a woman named Sharon Nelson, who is just truly a phenom. Ann Caprera, who is the campaign manager of our campaign, who has run numerous campaigns around the country and ran Priorities USA last year, and my own venture capital firm, which was named the venture capital firm that has supported the most women-founded businesses in the nation. I'm proud of that because women-founded businesses are the businesses that are going to change the face of our economy.
Thank you. I believe you all have closing statements. And let's begin. We started with Mr. Pritzker. Let's go backwards this way. So Senator Biss, would you like to go first? Sure. Closing statement.
Thank you very much. I think this was an incredibly helpful discussion. I think the depth of questions were incredibly important. And I think it's really, really important to acknowledge that the communities of activists represented in this room represent the future of this state, represent the future of this party, represent the future of this country. We all went to bed on November 8th trying to figure out what we were going to do about this crazy new world we found ourselves in. A lot of us were scared. I was. And we woke up the next morning and realized that there was a new community of activists flowering across the country. People who, yes, were scared, yes, were upset, yes, were angry, yes, were frightened, but more importantly, were ready to fight. We're ready to take action. We have the opportunity in this moment to build a new Democratic Party. We have the opportunity in this moment to right the wrongs, not just the tragic wrongs of the last 3 years during which Bruce Rauner has failed the state, but the wrongs of the previous decades, during the course of which time we did not build a just economy and a fair tax code and a system that had real gender equality and racial justice. This is a moment to build a movement to transform our society. I'm running for governor to build that movement, and I'm here to ask for your support. Thank you.
Well, I believe in the Democratic Party. I want it to be the future of this state. I want it to be the future of this country. I think that the thing that separates Democrats from Republicans is this. I think as Democrats that we believe that, well, government can play a positive role in our lives, but it can care for little babies, can educate young children, care for our disabled brothers and sisters, make sure our elderly parents have great retirements and first-class health care. That's what I think Democrats believe in. Government can be a positive role in people's lives. No one's going to believe in that. We'll never be able to get independents. We'll never be able to get all Democrats. We'll never be able to get our share of progressive Republicans to join us in our cause if we allow a corrupt system to continue in Illinois. If we're agreeable, if we'll look the other way, we'll destroy the future of our party and our state.
Okay. So,
Thank you.
okay. First and foremost, I want to thank you all for having me out here today. And Marilyn Katz and Betty Magnus, those are two ladies I listen to as well. I just wanted to say that. But this is the thing. Teal Hardeman and Patricia Avery, we're running a campaign. Our campaign is powered by the people. We have a 2020 plan which represents a perfect vision for all the good people here in the state of Illinois. I would like for everybody to think out of the box. I'm running to become the first African-American governor of the state of Illinois. Spread the word for me. And I always ask this question by a show of hands, how many people going to vote for me? I'm just messing with you. I'm just messing with you. But this is the thing. We have a proven leadership. I've been doing a lot of work in the state of Illinois. We're going to support the veterans, the senior citizens, the children, the women. We have 1.7 million people living in poverty in Illinois right now. We have to put a dent in that number there. I plan to reduce violence in Chicago, homicides in Chicago by 50%. We have an expertise in that area. They're telling me to stop already, so I plan to respect the rules. Thank you all very much. All right. That's good enough.
Well, let me begin by thanking Jackie, Mary Ann, and to all of the hosting organizations, and all of you for spending your afternoon listening to us here on stage. Look, I think any candidate on this stage would make a far better governor than Bruce Rauner. And we should stand together at the end of this primary. We should stand together. Indeed, now we should stand together because you heard on so many issues where we agree. And we, as Democrats, have an agenda to carry forward that's extraordinarily important for the state, and we must beat Bruce Rauner. But I think the question that voters ought to ask is, what were the candidates doing before they were running for public office, before they held public office, to really make a difference in people's lives all across the state of Illinois? That, I think, is a critical question, because I think it demonstrates what their heart is. And I have fought to expand school breakfast for low-income kids across the state. I've fought to expand quality preschool and quality childcare for thousands of kids here. 60,000 kids a year learn to fight bigotry and hatred and intolerance in the state because of the work that I've done. I ask you to support me because we have big things to do in Springfield. I've demonstrated the ability to get big things done. I'll work hard for you. Please join this campaign.
So you've been an incredibly great audience. Let you give yourselves a hand, please. We've had great moderators. Please give Jackie.
Dynamic duo.
And we've had exceptionally well-behaved and really cogent candidates. And I think we've heard them answer, whether you like their answers or not, the questions that you asked, and they deserve our applause for that.